Emily Carson had always felt invisible. At 22, she worked as a civilian range technician on a military training base tucked deep in the Nevada desert. Most people there didn't even know her name. They called her Target Girl or sometimes just whistled when they needed something moved. She didn't mind. She wasn't there for attention. She loved the smell of gunpowder, the crack of rifles in the distance, and the way the wind danced across the long, empty stretches of sand. The desert spoke in its own quiet language, and Emily had long since learned how to listen. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, she'd load the metal plates onto the back of a dusty utility cart, drive down to the range lanes, and start setting up. Her hands were calloused from the weight of the gear. Her face was tanned from months under the desert sun. She wore her ball cap low, kept her boots tight, and hardly ever smiled. But her eyes were sharp, always watching, always learning. The soldiers barely noticed to them. She was part of the background, like the gravel, the target frames, or the sandbags. They didn't see how she adjusted misaligned stands with precision, or how she watched the wind through the tall grass, like a sniper would. They didn't see the way she paused during lunch to read ballistic charts or replay slow-motion sniper videos on her cracked phone screen. They didn't know she came from a family of hunters in rural Montana, where hitting a buck at 400 yards was the difference between a freezer full of meat and going hungry. But Emily remembered everything, every angle, every miss, every noise. That echoed on the range. It was a Wednesday when everything started to change. A convoy of 10 Humvees rolled in early that morning, just as she was lining up steel plates at the 800-yard mark. The tires kicked up thick clouds of dust, and the sound of heavy boots stomping across gravel soon followed. She didn't have to be told who it was. SEALs, Navy SEAL teams didn't visit often. When they did, the entire range staff went on edge. These weren't average soldiers. They were the elite. Every move they made was sharp, deliberate. Every order was barked, every motion tight. They walked with the confidence of men who'd seen things no one wanted to talk about. Emily kept her head down and kept working. She'd seen special forces come and go before. They didn't talk to range techs. They didn't have to. Still, something about this team was different. She was adjusting a steel silhouette when a voice cut through the wind. "You're off by 2 inches. The base is tilted." She turned. One of the SEALs had approached without her hearing him. He was tall, lean, and sun-worn, with a trimmed beard and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wore no name tag, but the others called him Chief. His sleeves were rolled high, revealing tanned forearms marked with faint scars and sun-faded tattoos. Emily looked down. He was right. The frame was crooked. Without a word, she crouched and adjusted the leg. He didn't move, just watched her work. When she stood, he gave a single nod of approval and walked off. That was her first encounter with Chief Petty Officer Jason Maddox. Later that afternoon, Emily took her break near the observation deck, sipping lukewarm water and scanning her ballistic notebook. She didn't notice Maddox standing nearby, watching her jot down notes. His eyes drifted to the scribbles she'd made: angles, wind speeds, bullet drops. He raised an eyebrow. "You shoot?" She looked up. For a second, unsure if he was serious. "Grew up hunting," she replied. "My dad taught me. Montana." He nodded slowly. "What caliber?" .308, mostly. Sometimes .243. Used a .270 when we were after elk in high country. There was silence for a beat. Then a small smirk tugged at the edge of his face. "Ever tried a .300 in mag?" Her eyes widened slightly. "No, that's serious reach." "It is." He paused. "We'll be doing some long-range tests tomorrow. Come by." Before she could answer, he was gone. The next morning, The sun rose blood-red across the range. Emily tried to push the memory aside. Maybe he hadn't meant it. Maybe it was a joke. She kept her routine stacking targets, replacing shot up silhouettes, but her thoughts weren't on the ground anymore. They were 1,200 yards out, shimmering in the mirage. Around noon, Jason Maddox approached again. In his hands was a long, matte black rifle, sleek, heavy, deadly. The .300 Win mag. He handed it to her without a word. She froze. It felt like holding a lightning bolt. Around them, a few of the SEALs chuckled under their breath. One raised an eyebrow. "You serious, Chief?" Maddox didn't even look at him. "Everyone gets one shot," he said. "Let's see if she knows how to breathe." Emily stared down the range. The steel plate in the distance shimmered under the heat waves like a ghost. She laid prone, rifle against her shoulder. Scope zeroed. Everything went silent. The girl nobody noticed was about to take the shot nobody expected. Chief Petty Officer Jason Maddox wasn't easily impressed. After 19 years in the Navy, 12 of them in SEAL teams, he had seen more than enough bravado, foolishness, and false confidence to know when someone had the real thing. And real didn't come with noise. Real was quiet, focused, lethal when it mattered. That's what struck him about Emily Carson. He'd first noticed her the moment they arrived. She wasn't standing around, wasn't chatting or slacking off. She was working, efficient, precise. She moved like someone with purpose, even if it was just hammering steel plates into dry dirt. Most people wouldn't notice. Jason did. At first, he observed casually. But as the day went on, his curiosity sharpened. She wasn't just physically capable, she was watching. When his team adjusted for wind, she looked up at the flags. When someone missed a shot, she took note. And when others laughed, she kept her expression still, calm under noise. It was rare. Later that day, while checking the scope alignment on his sniper rifle, Jason found himself glancing across the range. There she was again, crouched by a blown-over target, brushing off dust and checking the base with a leveling gauge. Civilian range techs weren't required to do that. They were told to set and forget. But she didn't just do what was required. She did it like it meant something. He waited until she took a break and approached without a word. Her head was buried in a small notebook, her lips silently counting. She didn't notice him until he asked, "You shoot?" The way she looked up, not startled but ready, told him everything. "Grew up hunting," she answered. "My dad taught." Montana." Jason nodded, eyes flicking to the scribbles in her notebook. Wind speeds. Bullet drop data. Elevation. Ballistics notes. That was not something most hunters wrote down. Hell, most soldiers didn't either. What caliber? .308, sometimes .243, she replied. Used a .27. Oh, when we went after elk. He nodded again. No hesitation, no bluff. She knew what she was talking about. And that notebook, well, it wasn't decoration. Ever tried a .30 Win mag? That got her attention. She glanced at him, surprised. Never. Jason studied her for a moment longer. You will. And with that, he walked off. He didn't explain, didn't offer encouragement. It wasn't his style. If she had the guts to show up, she'd show up. If not, it was just another chance lost to fear. That's what separated people in this line of work, who steps forward when everything says stay back. The next day arrived like any other, but Emily felt it in her gut something different was coming. She tried to bury the thought and focus on work, but it followed her with every target she set up. It wasn't nerves. It was something else. Excitement, maybe. Fear, definitely. But also something deeper - possibility. By noon, the heat was almost unbearable. Heat shimmered off the barrels, off the metal plates, even off her skin. She finished checking the 1,000-yard lane when a shadow fell over her. Jason. In his hands was the beast, itself his personal .300 Win mag rifle. Custom-built, matte black, with a long fluted barrel and precision scope. It looked like it could shoot through time. He held it out to her casually, like it was a pair of gloves. Emily hesitated, heart pounding. "You serious?" she asked, almost a whisper. Jason nodded. "She's sighted in for 1,000. The target's at 12. Win's right. One click high, one click right. You miss, no shame. You hit, it ain't luck." Behind them, the SEALs gathered. Some leaned on Humvees. Others folded their arms and waited. One of them chuckled under his breath. "We're letting civilians shoot now?" Jason didn't even glance his way. Emily knelt, the rifle heavier than anything she'd ever held. The grip felt foreign and familiar all at once. The bipod dug into the gravel as she settled into position. She looked through the scope. There it was, the 12-inch steel plate, barely visible at 1,200 yards, dancing in the desert haze. It looked tiny, almost unreal. The wind whispered against her cheek, but her world had narrowed into a tunnel. There was only the rifle, the target, the breath. Jason crouched beside her, voice low. "Line up, don't jerk. Let the gun do the work." She nodded. Her fingers tightened on the stock. Her breathing slowed. In, out. In, the world disappeared. She squeezed the trigger. Boom. The rifle kicked hard, but her shoulder held firm. There was silence. A second passed. 2. Then, clang. A faint echo rang from the distance. The steel plate swung ever so slightly. Dead hit. Emily blinked, slowly sat up. Her hands were shaking, but only slightly. Around her, not a word was said for several moments. Then someone muttered, "No way." Another SEAL let out a soft, impressed whistle. Jason didn't smile, but he gave a single firm nod. "Good shot." Emily lowered the rifle gently onto the gravel. She couldn't believe it. It felt like she'd been holding her breath for a lifetime. Jason picked up the spent shell and handed it to her. "Keep it," he said. "Some shots you don't forget." Emily stared at the brass casing in her hand, still warm from the fire. Neither did he. Emily sat in the gravel, holding the still warm shell casing in her palm like it was a relic. Around her, the murmurs had faded, and the heat returned to its usual silence. The SEALs dispersed without much talk. They were trained to hide surprise. But Emily had felt it in the air. That stunned pause. That subtle shift of posture. The kind that happens when someone defies expectation, especially someone like her. Jason Maddox remained kneeling beside her, watching. His eyes, usually guarded, now carried something new: respect. Not just for the shot, for her poise, for her control, for the fact she didn't stand up and gloat like so many others might have. "Who taught you how to breathe like that?" he asked, his voice low. Emily shrugged. "My dad. He used to say, hitting your mark has more to do with your lungs than your eyes." Jason smirked. "Smart man." She finally stood, brushing gravel off her jeans. The heavy rifle still rested on its bipod, silent and patient like a coiled beast. She looked at it differently now. Not with fear, but with familiarity. It hadn't just been a shot, it had been a conversation. Between her and the rifle. Between instinct and science. "You ever think about competing?" Jason asked suddenly. Emily laughed under her breath. "I stalk targets and sweep brass for a living." "That's not what I asked." She hesitated. "I wouldn't even know where to start." Jason stared out across the range. "Start where everyone starts, with one shot." Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. "Chief Maddox," marked an older officer approaching from the shaded command tent. "Colonel Hughes, Sharp uniform. Sharper eyes. He glanced at Emily, then at the rifle. I heard a civilian just fired a military precision rifle during your session. Is that correct? Jason didn't blink. Yes, sir. You authorized this? Yes, sir. There was a long pause. The colonel's eyes narrowed. This isn't a game, Chief. These weapons aren't props for ranged techs. She hit the 1,200-yard target, sir. First shot. Hughes looked at Emily, unimpressed. A lucky civilian shot is still a violation of protocol. Jason's voice stayed even. With respect, sir, she's got the makings of a better shot than half the new snipers I've trained. Emily tensed. She felt heat creep up her neck, not from the sun, but from embarrassment. This wasn't what she wanted to be the center of controversy. She'd been invisible for so long that stepping into the spotlight now felt like standing in front of an oncoming train. The colonel shook his head. I want a written report on this. And next time, Chief, keep your rifles in qualified hands. He turned and walked off without another word. Jason didn't move, didn't sigh, just stood and picked up the rifle, slinging it over his shoulder. Emily stared at the ground. I didn't mean to cause a problem. Jason looked at her, and for the first time, there was real intensity behind his words. You didn't cause a problem. You revealed one. She didn't know what to say. You earned something today, he continued, and people are going to hate that. Because it wasn't handed to you. It came from somewhere real. He handed her the shell casing again, firmer. This time, don't give it back. Over the next few days, the base felt colder. Some soldiers looked at her differently now. Some with curiosity, others with annoyance. One sergeant called her Annie Oakley with a smirk, loud enough for everyone to hear. Another said, Heard you're a sniper now, dripping with sarcasm. She ignored them, but the whispers followed her everywhere. She knew what they were thinking. A tech? One lucky shot, and now she thinks she's elite? That's how it always was. For someone like her, quiet, unranked, unimportant, it didn't matter how good you were. It mattered who said you were good, and Jason Maddox had said it. That changed everything. Still, Emily returned to her duties. Targets didn't hang themselves. Spent brass didn't sweep itself. But now, she stayed a little later, practiced breathing, techniques behind the range tower, and started building a spreadsheet on bullet drop across calibers. Not because she thought she was special, but because she knew the shot hadn't been a fluke. She wanted to understand why she'd hit it, why it felt so natural. Why part of her now craved another chance. 3 days later, she saw Jason again. Briefly, he was packing up with his team, preparing to ship out to another training ground. They exchanged no words, just a nod, the kind that carried weight without sound. But that evening, just before sunset, a junior logistics officer approached her while she was cleaning in the depot. He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a folded sheet with a navy letterhead. It read, Invitation to attend civilian marksmanship evaluation, advanced tier, range, Fort Rainier date, October 12th applicant, Emily Carson. Her breath caught. At the bottom, it was signed, endorsed by CPO Jason Maddox, SEAL Team 9. She read it 3 times. And once more. It didn't feel real. She had no rank, no title. But someone had opened a door anyway. Not just a door to a new opportunity, but to a new version of herself. She wasn't just the girl who set targets anymore. She was the girl who'd made the shot, and something told her that wasn't the last time she would. The invitation sat on her nightstand for 3 days. Emily stared at it every morning before work, every evening before bed. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the ink or signature, but because of what it meant. Fort Rainier. Advanced Civilian Marksmanship Evaluation. It sounded official. It was official. But all Emily could think about was the voice in her head, whispering the same thing over and over. You don't belong there. She wasn't military. Not law enforcement. Not a contractor. Just a girl from Montana who could shoot straight and stayed invisible until one perfect shot made her seen. She didn't know if she was ready for more of that. More eyes, more doubt, more chances to fail. Still, something deeper, something quieter told her this wasn't a coincidence. Jason hadn't handed her that invitation lightly. He saw something in her. She felt it when he'd handed her the rifle, when he didn't flinch, when he'd stood up to the colonel, and she couldn't stop thinking about the feel of the trigger. The recoil, the silence before the clang. It had felt. Right. 2 weeks later, she stepped off the bus at Fort Rainier with a duffel bag over her shoulder and nerves tightening in her stomach. The air here was cooler than Nevada. Forests loomed in the distance. The range was larger, built for serious marksmen, not casual shooters. It felt like sacred ground. She signed in at the gate. No one greeted her with a smile. The man checking IDs barely looked at her, just nodded and pointed to a barracks tent at the edge of the training field. Inside, a few others were already unpacking. 3 men. 1 woman, all older. All quiet. They looked at her but said nothing. She could feel it again, that question in their eyes. Why are you here? She unpacked her basic gear, set her notebook on the bunk, and sat quietly. That night, in the mess hall, she overheard snippets of conversation. Double quotes, retired Army sniper from Oregon, former SWAT guy from Dallas, contracted in Afghanistan, 2017 to 2020, They were professionals. She was just a tech with a lucky shot. Her appetite disappeared. The next morning, the air was brisk as they lined up at the 1,200-yard mark. Steel targets gleamed in the distance like tiny ghosts. Instructors walked the line, calling names, assigning rifles. When they got to Emily, one instructor, a grizzled sergeant named Banner, hesitated. You're the civilian? He asked, eyes scanning her small frame. She nodded. Yes, sir. You ever shoot past 1,000? Once. He raised a brow. Hit? Yes, sir. He paused, then handed her a heavy, sand-colored rifle with a Schmidt and Bender scope. Don't break it. The others smirked. Emily said nothing. She walked to her firing lane, laid out the rifle, and breathed. Each shooter would get 5 shots to calibrate, then 3 timed shots under pressure. Wind readings were posted on a digital screen. The sun was rising fast, creating visible mirage on the range, waves of heat and distortion that would throw off even skilled eyes. Emily lay flat, her body pressing against the cold earth. She adjusted the scope, checked her eye relief, listened to the wind. Her fingers steadied the bolt. Shot 1, boom. Low left. Shot 2, boom. Center. Clean hit. Shot 3, boom. Just off. Slight wind shift. She recalibrated her position, tuned everything else out. 4, 5. Both center hits. Then came the time test. 3 shots. 30 seconds. Steel target. 1,200 yards. Instructor Banner stood behind her with a stopwatch. Shooter ready? She nodded. Begin. Her breath vanished. Shot 1, boom. Hit. Adjust. Shot 2, boom. Hit. Barely. 1 second left. Shot 3, boom. She wasn't sure. Banner looked up at the spotter screen. 3 hits. Emily exhaled. Finally. When the scores were posted that afternoon, Emily didn't look right away. She waited until most others had left the board. Then she walked over. Emily Carson, 2nd place overall. Just 1 point behind a former SEAL sniper. She stared at the result. Someone behind her whistled. You the one who just came from dessert? Rock? She turned to see one of the shooters, the SWAT guy from Dallas. He smiled. Heard a SEAL gave you his rifle. Must have seen something. Looks like he was right. Emily said nothing, just nodded slightly and walked away, her pulse roaring in her ears. This wasn't a fluke. She knew that now, but it didn't mean it would be easy. That night, she lay on her bunk, staring at the canvas ceiling of the tent. She'd come here full of doubt. But now she felt something else. Conviction. The next morning, Sergeant Banner called her aside. You shooting again? She hesitated. Wasn't sure I'd be invited back. Banner cracked a rare smile. Don't need an invite. You already showed up. She blinked. You want to assist the next class? Teach wind reading? Shot cadence? He asked. We could use eyes like yours. Emily looked at him, stunned. You? Serious? Dead serious? She nodded slowly. And just like that, the girl who once swept brass now stood at the edge of something entirely new. The world had handed her a shot, and she'd taken it dead center. Emily returned to the Nevada base 2 days after the Fort Rainier evaluation, with her duffel over one shoulder and a new kind of silence waiting for her. It wasn't the usual quiet of early morning on the range. It was heavier, tighter, the kind of quiet that wraps around people when they don't know what to say, or choose not to. Word had already traveled faster than she had. She didn't even need to ask how. Maybe someone from the fort had shared her name. Maybe Jason Maddox had spoken of her during a debrief. Either way, the story had grown wings. Civilian tech beat out SEALs at their own game. Some soldiers looked at her differently now. Some gave polite nods or stayed neutral. But many didn't hide their irritation. The teasing became sharper, louder, less funny. Target girl's a sniper now? Don't forget your clipboard, sharpshooter? Next thing you know, she'll want a medal. At first, Emily tried to brush it off. She stuck to her routine setting. Targets at sunrise, checking angles, tracking wind patterns. But the shift was unavoidable. Every time she walked past the locker bays or into the mess hall, conversations paused. Eyes followed her, not in awe, but with skepticism, with disbelief, wrapped in sarcasm that it wasn't what she'd expected. She thought proving herself would earn respect. Instead, it had made her a threat. One afternoon, she overheard a conversation behind the shooting sheds. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She was refilling a bin of earplugs when 2 instructors came into range of her hearing. Whole thing's political now. Let one civilian girl show us up, and suddenly every journalist wants to talk about natural talent. Yeah, well, she made a shot. Big deal. Doesn't mean she's qualified. You know Maddox is backing her, right? Exactly. That's why it's messy. The word stung. Not because they doubted her, but because they refused to see what mattered. The work, the training, the hours she put in while no one watched. That shot wasn't handed to her. She'd built it, one bullet at a time. Later that same day, she found herself alone on the long-distance lane. Everyone had gone in for chow, but she stayed behind, laying prone with her old Winchester .270 she'd brought from Montana. It wasn't military grade. It was personal, scarred from years of hunts. But it was hers. She adjusted the scope, calmed her breath, and fired at a silhouette at 800 yards. Clang. Then again. All hits, but there was no applause. No audience. Just wind and dust. And somehow, she preferred it that way. That night, she got a message paper, hand-delivered. Official base letterhead. It came from the range commander's office. Emily's stomach tightened. Inside was a formal notice. Effective immediately. Civilian staff will not be permitted to handle military sniper-class weapons during any active SEAL or Special Forces training programs unless formally certified by base operations. She read the letter twice. Then again, it didn't mention her by name, but it didn't need to. This was a direct response to her, and it stung more than any insult could. She wasn't being punished. She was being shut out. She considered quitting. That night, she sat on the back step of her trailer, looking out across the dark range. Her duffel beside her, half packed. The stars were out, cold, distant, but familiar. She remembered staring at them during long nights hunting elk with her dad. Remembered whispering wind calls with frozen lips, waiting for a clean shot. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the spent .300 Win Mag shell casing Jason had given her. Still there, still warm in memory. She held it for a long time, then put it away. Not yet. The next morning, Emily walked back onto the range like she belonged. Because she did. She didn't touch military rifles. Didn't speak to instructors. She just worked. And during break, she walked into the training office and asked one simple question. How do I become certified? The young corporal behind the desk looked up, confused. Certified for what? To handle sniper-class weapons? To instruct? To do it by your book? He blinked. You want to go through the marksman instructor path? Yes. That's military side. I know. But if there's a civilian track, I want on it. If not, I'll build one. He stared at her for a moment, then slowly nodded. I'll get you a list. Later that day, Emily received an unexpected call through the base comms room. Jason Maddox. She walked into the dusty booth, picked up the phone, and heard his voice crackling through. Heard what happened, he said. I'm not surprised, she replied quietly. I didn't back you because of luck, Emily. You've got it. But talent makes people nervous. I know. There was a pause. Stay sharp, he said. If they won't let you through the door, you build your own. She smiled faintly. Already started. She hung up. Then she walked back outside. To the range, where the targets waited under the afternoon sun still, silent and ready. The whispers hadn't stopped, but neither had she. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of quiet resilience. 2 weeks of 4 a.m. wake-ups, loading up her Winchester, and practicing alone before the others even rolled out of bed. 2 weeks of wind charts taped to her trailer wall, of reading sniper manuals by flashlight, and watching YouTube footage of elite shooting competitions until her eyes ached. Emily wasn't proving anything to the base anymore. She was proving it to herself. Every doubt, every sideways glance she got after her shot, that was fuel. But even fire needs form. So she gave herself one goal. Get certified. No shortcuts. No favors. The civilian certification process was a tangle of red tape. The only track available was through a rare program built for defense contractors and law enforcement snipers who trained alongside military units for joint operations. There were written exams, range tests, endurance trials, ballistics assessments, and Emily had to do it all unpaid, off the clock, on her own time. So she did. She borrowed old texts from one of the armory clerks, who secretly rooted for her. She ran wing correction problems at night, using formulas more complex than anything she'd ever touched in school. She started building her own rounds, custom loads for specific distances, learning grain weights and powder ratios like a chemist. She even took online courses in physics, just so she could understand why a bullet drifted the way it did in a CROSSW IND. By the end of the second week, she passed the written exam with perfect marks. Then came the practical. Emily had to qualify on 5 rifles, none of them her own, and hit targets ranging from 300 to 1,500 yards under pressure, with shifting wind, changing elevation, and a 5-minute countdown on each course. She stepped onto the private test range wearing her own boots, her old baseball cap from home, and a patch stitched on her sleeve with 3 words, "Steal never." Lies. 2 instructors, both veterans, watched with folded arms. "You ready?" one asked. "I was born ready," she said. Gripping the rifle. Her hands didn't shake. The first 3 targets came easy. The 4th was 1,200 yards wind cross at 9 miles per hour. She took a deep breath, adjusted her scope, and fired. Clang. "Hit," one instructor said, slightly impressed. The final shot was 1,500 yards. Just her, the rifle, and a distant steel plate that shimmered in the heat. She steadied her breath. Heartbeat down. Time nearly up. Squeeze. Crack. They waited. Clang. She hit it. The instructor whistled low and nodded. "You're not playing around." "No," Emily said quietly. "I never was." Later that day, she received her official qualification paperwork. She was now a certified civilian long-range instructor, one of fewer than a dozen in the country. As she held the certificate in her hands, she didn't feel victorious. She felt ready. A week later, Jason Maddox returned. No one announced it. No ceremony. No applause. Just the familiar figure of a SEAL with a duffel on his shoulder and a calmness in his step. He walked onto the range like he never left, but when he saw Emily, this time not carrying targets, but standing by a spotting scope, clipboard in hand, gear organized beside her, he paused. She looked different. Confident. Grounded. Focused. "Emily." He nodded. "Jason," she replied. He gestured to the rifle lane. "Want to spot me?" She smirked. "Only if you want someone honest." As the day wore on, the new SEAL trainees began filtering in fresh faces, eager hands. Jason supervised their drills, correcting form, whispering tips. But when a young recruit struggled with wind calls at 800 yards, Jason surprised everyone. He turned to Emily. "You want to walk him through it?" There was a beat of silence. The other instructors froze. Emily walked forward, calm. She knelt beside the young SEAL, adjusted his elbow, and said softly, "You're riding the trigger too hard. Breathe in, then out, then press not yank." The recruit nodded, reset his. Aimed and fired. Clang. A hit. He grinned. Emily just smiled, already walking away. Jason chuckled under his breath. Over coffee at the outdoor bench, Jason leaned toward her. "There's a civilian-military joint marksmanship event next month. Invite only." She looked at him carefully. "And I pulled a string. They're curious about you. Want to see if lightning strikes twice." Emily didn't flinch. "You think it will?" "I don't believe in lightning," he said. "I believe in shooters who train when no one's watching." She stared out at the long stretch of dusty range, the flags rippling in the wind. "Then let's show them." The invitation arrived in a plain envelope. No fanfare. No signature. Just a date, a time, and GPS coordinates, somewhere in the Colorado Highlands. Emily stared at, like it was a ticket to another world. She knew what this was. The summit? An elite, private competition for the best military and civilian shooters in the country. Some called it the Sniper Olympics. Others didn't talk about it at all. No spectators. No cameras. Just steel, dirt, wind, and willpower. The only way in? You earned it, or someone vouched with their name on the line. Jason was that someone. He hadn't said much about it. Just a nod and one sentence. Don't show up to prove anything. Show up to remind them they were wrong. So she packed her rifle. The same custom bolt action she'd been building piece by piece over the last 3 months. Every part tuned. Every bullet hand-loaded. Every scratch on it earned. At the airport, no one looked twice at her boots or the olive green case marked with her initials. She was just another face. And she liked it that way. The summit was held deep in the Colorado Rockies. No cell service. No excuses. By the time Emily arrived, the camp was already buzzing. 30 shooters, SEALs, Rangers, Marine snipers, SWAT instructors, and 3 civilians. She was the only woman. The others stared when she walked in. Not malicious, just curious. Most thought she was someone's assistant. Maybe pressed until she laid her rifle on the bench, uncased it, and began adjusting her optics. The murmurs started. That's her? Isn't she the one from Nevada? The SEAL girl? Jason didn't say a word. He just passed her a clipboard and walked away. The first day was warm-ups. Simple drills. Wind calls at 600, 800, and 1,000 yards. Time trials. Target recognition under pressure. Emily kept her head down. Let the shots speak. One after another, her bullets rang steel. Not flashy, just dead accurate. A former ranger approached her after. Lunch. You shoot clean, he said. Where'd you learn? She looked up. Montana, then the hard way. He nodded and walked off. No more questions. Respect at the summit wasn't given. It was one click at a time. Day 2 brought the nightmare. The Gill Run. A 3-hour endurance event through mountain brush. Full gear. Carrying your rifle. Finding 10 hidden targets from uneven ground. Elevation. 8,500 feet. Time limit. 2 hours. Miss 3. You're cut. Emily started strong, tracking wind shifts, crawling through thorns. Mud on her elbows. At one point, she slipped off a rock and slammed her knee. Blood ran into her boot. She didn't stop. The 9th target was nearly impossible. A half-covered plate behind brush. She calculated, adjusted, exhaled, and took the shot. Ping. She made it to the finish line with 6 minutes to spare. That night, Jason found her cleaning her rifle by the fire pit. You're in the top 10, he said, watching her swab the barrel. I don't care, she replied. I just want to finish clean. He gave a small grin. You will. She glanced at him. Why did you vouch for me, really? Jason looked at the stars above, then back at her. Because when I gave you my rifle that day, I didn't see luck. I saw clarity. That thing most people never find. What thing? He smiled faintly. Purpose. And purpose never misses. Day 3 was the finals. 5 shooters left. The best of the best. They called it the shot. 1 unknown distance, 1 round, 1 chance. No second tries. No wind flags. Coaching. Just a cold bore shot into the void. Helicopter dropped each finalist onto separate ridges. Emily's legs trembled as she set up her gear. Not from fear, from altitude and exhaustion. She scanned the valley. Fog rolled low. The target, a small steel square, barely visible. She closed her eyes. Inhaled. The world fell quiet. She became still. Squeeze. Boom. Echoes. Then silence. Then clang. She hit it. Back at base camp, when scores were tallied, she placed 2nd overall. But that wasn't what mattered. Jason approached, a medal in hand. Not gold, not silver, a simple steel coin marked honor shot. He handed it to her. Only 4 of those have ever been given, he said. Emily looked down at it, emotion catching in her chest. I don't know what to say, she whispered. He shrugged. Then just keep shooting. She looked out at the mountains, the clouds, the silence. For the first time in her life, Emily Carson belonged, not as a visitor, but as an equal. Emily returned to Nevada, quietly. Got no interviews. No press. Just her old truck rumbling down the dirt road back to the range where it all began. The same place where she once carried targets and swept shells. She parked, climbed out, and stood in silence, staring across the familiar desert. But something had changed. She had changed. Word of her performance at the summit spread faster than she expected. Jason might not have said much, But others did. Video footage, taken by drone, captured her final shot. The bullet that struck steel from an impossible ridge, in wind and fog, became viral among elite shooters and military forums. They called her the Ghost Trigger. Not because she was invisible, but because no one saw her coming. A month later, the U.S. Navy extended her an invitation to speak at a private event in Quantico. Not a lecture, a demonstration. She hesitated, but Jason nudged her. You've already proven it to yourself. Now show them. So she went, wore a simple range vest, brought her rifle, kept it quiet. What began as a few officers watching turned into 100, then more. High-ranking officials, defense contractors, sniper instructors from 5 different branches. She shot every course clean, blindfolded one, nailed a moving target at 1,200 yards. When it was over, a general walked up to her. Ever thought of teaching full-time? He asked. She blinked. Teaching who? Everyone. Soon after, Emily was offered a role as an advisory sniper trainer. Civilian status, but working directly with elite units across the country. Not because she served in combat, but because she proved something no classroom could teach. She said yes, under one condition. She wanted to keep her Nevada range. To train anyone who came in with heart and grit, military or not. Done. They said, the girl who once carried targets for others now trained some of the best in the world. She built custom drills, innovated new wind calling systems, even designed a simulator program used by special ops. But her favorite days? The quiet ones, when a young woman or boy from a nearby town stepped onto her dirt range and asked, "Can I try?" And she'd say, "Only if you're ready to learn." Years passed. Emily's story became legend. Not because she broke records, but because she rewrote the rules. She didn't just shatter expectations. She built something stronger in their place. Books were written. A documentary filmed. She didn't like the attention, but she smiled when veterans brought their daughters to meet her, telling them, "This is who you can become." She never sought fame. She sought clarity. One summer evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Emily sat alone by her trailer, sipping tea, her dog asleep at her feet, the air still. Jason arrived, unannounced as always. He sat beside her without a word. Passing her an envelope, she opened it. Inside, a letter from the Navy, a formal offer, honorary SEAL instructor, civilian grade. A title, never given before. Her hand trembled slightly. "You knew this was coming?" she asked. Jason nodded. "They've been watching since that first shot." She looked out at the targets in the distance, wind ruffling the brush. Then she smiled. "Guess I'll need a new hat." The plaque still hangs inside the range office. It reads, "Emily Carson, proof that courage isn't issued. It's earned. One shot at a time." And beneath it, the steel coin Jason gave her, the honor shot, gleamed softly under the desert sun. The end.